Teachers, what was the strangest encounter you've had with a student's parents? I had a father, a very large man, who came up to my table and said, "So, what do you want to tell me about that bastard son of mine? I've already heard plenty of crap from everyone else." He looked very angry. Taking a breath, I told him what a wonderful student his son was and how respectful he was and what a joy it was to have him in my class. He left, seeming a bit skeptical. The next day, his son came to see me before school started and thanked me. He said that I was the only reason his dad didn't come home and beat the hell out of him last night. I was shocked to learn as we talked that he was being abused regularly. I did turn the father into social services, and I later found out the son went to live with his aunt. I also learned many years later that the boy had done well in school, went to university, and is now working in a job he loves, and has a loving family of his own. Moral of the story, teachers, be very aware when criticizing a student. Choose your words carefully. It could save a child from harm. Next story. Not a teacher, but if I may relay a story, I was a rather hefty kid in junior high. My art teacher was a rather harsh individual who never tried to hide his thoughts. To be blunt, he was a bully to many students. He often made comments about my weight, which was pretty upsetting to say the least. One day after a particularly nasty verbal attack, including calling me a human garburator, my parents decided it was time to confront him. They scheduled a meeting with the teacher and the principal. So I'm sitting there in the principal's office with my mom, stepdad, principal, and art teacher. The issue of his bullying is discussed. The art teacher looks at my mom and says something along the lines of, "Well, now I know where the fat comes from." Stepdad leaps to his feet. "Don't you dare talk about my family like that." Our teacher jumps up, goes toe-to-toe with my stepdad. "You have a problem hearing the truth?" Principal says, "Gentlemen, can we please be rational?" Mom tries to get between stepdad and art teacher. Art teacher shoves mom out of the way. Stepdad is super pissed. "How dare you touch my wife?" Art teacher shoves stepdad, "Do something about it." And stepdad breaks art teacher's nose. OP, how dare you not tell us how this ended? If anything happened except for the suspension or probably just the firing of the art teacher, then I'm going to be so mad. There's no way he sat in front of you guys and the principal and said, "Now I know where the fat comes from." There's no way, right? That's insanity. This person shouldn't be allowed to interact with humans, let alone teach kids. Next story. I work with technology and education and ran across this story from a teacher in the school where it happened. A second grade boy is doing cartwheels in the middle of class during reading. The teacher reached for the student before he cartwheels himself into a desk and potentially injures himself. The ring on the teacher accidentally scratches the kid's arm but doesn't break the skin. When the student goes home, the mother notices the scratch and the student tells his mother the teacher scratched him on purpose because she was angry at him. The mother goes to the school, runs through the front office and down to the teacher's classroom. The insane mother grabs the teacher by her hair, beats the teacher's head into the desk multiple times. By the time the office staff chase her down, the lady runs out the back of the school where her friend is waiting and they speed off to wherever. Teacher is left with a bloody and broken nose. She had only been teaching as a second career for a few weeks. Yeah, I wonder where that kid learned that someone would hurt him because they're mad at him. Really no clue where that thought could have come from. People like this really feel like they shouldn't be parents, you know? That's obviously a very harsh, broad statement and an over-exaggeration, but it kind of does feel like it, doesn't it? How can you be trusted to raise a human if this is how you act as an adult? Gosh. Next story. I'm a sub, and I just had a strange situation yesterday. Not quite an encounter. I subbed for the same kindergarten class Monday and Tuesday. The plans made a note that Zarya, a sweet kid with severe disabilities, spina bifida, I think, shouldn't take her gloves and hat home, but should leave them at school. But on Monday, I must have overlooked her, putting them in her backpack in the chaos. This would usually just be parents leaving a set of gloves or hat at school for convenience. It's no big deal. Next day, the playground supervisor sends a kid to get Zarya's gloves and hat, and I looked. None in the room, none in the backpack. "I must have sent them home by accident yesterday," I said. "Oh, no," said the playground helper. "We can't send her gloves and hat home. Her mom throws them away." My jaw hanging open, I couldn't help but ask for an explanation. We live in an extremely cold state. Some parents just aren't completely with it, if you know what I mean. I still can't get my head around it. I went out and bought a new hat and gloves and took them in today for Zarya, by the way. The nicest, prettiest ones I could afford. Next story. Parent-teacher conferences. My first year paid teaching. Parent comes in literally with 1 minute to go before we're off for the night. So we're chatting, and her daughter's a great student, so it's an easy conference. Then I feel something hit my head. "Mouse!" Me, looking around. "Who's throwing a mouse at me?" Parent. "No, a real mouse. Look!" She points at the ground and I see an actual, real-life mouse. I look up and see it had been dropped from a ceiling tile missing in the ceiling. It scurries underneath my coworker's desk. He's also having a conference with a parent. Somebody yells to him, "Mouse!" And he looks down, stomps the mouse with his boot, and continues the conference like nothing happened. Best part of it was at the next staff meeting, one of my coworkers gifted me a bike helmet covered in mouse traps for protection. Next story. I had a kid once who was rather weird. Very impulsive, odd sense of humor, aggravated the crap out of the other kids. I met his mom at a conference tonight and everything was explained. She was a close talker, continually did that phlegmy sinus snort thing every 10 to 15 seconds, and went on several conspiracy theory tirades that had nothing to do with anything we were discussing. In 15 years of teaching, it was rare to meet a parent for the first time and not have all of the classroom concerns clearly explained. Next story. I had a parent tell me I was obviously a racist, and that it was clear to her that I was prejudiced against biracial people like her child. She absolutely tore me a new one about assigning her daughter detention for her constant tardiness and refusal to do class or homework, and that I was obviously targeting her due to her heritage. I happily invited her for a parent-teacher conference. I am Mexican-Italian, and the conference was right after I had gotten back from a cruise to the Bahamas. When I spend time in the sun, I turn a delicious dark brown color, and along with my curly hair and very dark brown eyes, many people assume I'm biracial. The parent came in, took one long look at me, turned around, walked out, and I never heard from her again. What do you mean many people assume you're biracial? You just said you were, right? Am I misreading that? OP says they're Mexican-Italian. That's biracial to me. OP makes it sound like some kind of deceit was done. But no, they are just biracial. Next story. High school English teacher here. Nothing beats my very first parent-teacher conference meeting ever. Important note, I live in a small island community. Everybody knows someone who knows you. People frequently ask for your parents' name in order to see if they're related to you or if they know you. I am 22 years old, about to have my first PTC, and I'm super nervous. Finally, a parent comes up to me. "So, you're Ms. Rachel? Is your dad—" My dad's name. "Yes, sir. I remember you running around our apartment complex about this tall," indicates how tiny I was with his hand, "with nothing but a diaper on." I was at a total loss for words. Next story. I once had a student who wasn't living up to his potential in class. This is high school, and I teach a media class focused on digital photography, graphic design, and video editing. During the editing portion of the year, the student, who had been excellent all year and had expressed massive interest earlier in the year regarding said portion, decided he didn't care anymore. He turned in quarter-baked projects. I say quarter because this wasn't even half-baked. He failed. I was disappointed and told him I would give him another week to fix some of the mistakes and possibly raise his grade as high as a C, which is passing. He accepted, and a week goes by. Then I ask him where his project is, and his reply was, "I didn't do it." That was fine. He received the failing grade. Not my problem, so I thought. The next week is parent-teacher conferences. Now, because I don't teach a core class, per se, not a lot of parents feel the need to see how their son or daughter is designing film posters or using the rule of thirds. However, the student in question arrived looking sullen at my door with his parents behind him. I welcomed them in and had them take a seat, but before the mother sat down, she went off on me. "Who the hell do you think you are? You've ruined his entire GPA. This is the field he most wants into, and you're discouraging him with grades like this," etc., etc. I politely explained the situation to her and her husband to no avail. This wasn't their son's fault. He was only given an assignment and a time frame. When that wasn't enough and I gave him a second chance in the field he most wants to get into, he declined to fix any mistakes and raise his grade. This is when the mother basically leans across the table into my face and says, "All you male teachers are the same. You only care about looking at these young girls. They get special treatment. I know your kind. You make me sick." Now, at the time, this was my second year teaching, and being in my late 20s, I was one of the youngest males on the staff. I was pretty shaken by this, because we all know how fine a line must be walked when dealing with accusations of this nature. I continued to listen to her rant for about 5 minutes while her husband, who I actually felt kind of bad for, just sat silent with his head down. The student seemed completely unfazed by his mother's tirade and just sort of smirked. She concluded with, "You either give him another chance or regrade his project on equal terms." They went a few minutes over their allotted time, and I had another set of parents waiting in the hallway listening to all of this. After the madness settled and they left the room, The waiting parents came in and just said, "Wow." I was pretty uncomfortable and I told them it was a rare instance, but apologized nonetheless. As they were the last visitors of the night, I immediately went to my superiors and told them what happened. It should be noted the mother is a prominent member of the school board and also a teacher in the same district. Luckily, my principals backed me up as she had been belligerent to others as well. She never once apologized, and I had 3 more visits throughout the year with her. Now I cringe during PTAs, not because of a student's poor performance, but because we live in a day and age where the student is always right. I haven't changed the way I grade or teach, but bloody hell, this is a problem I encounter every year more and more frequently. TLDR, mother of a student got in my face and accused me of being sexist towards students because her son earned a bad grade. Next story. The joy of teaching is that there is no shortage of awkward moments. It was discovered that a female student was signing my last name on all of her schoolwork. We are not related. Needless to say, it was a big freaking deal. There were multiple meetings with the administration and the police to see if it were an inappropriate relationship. I had no idea any of this was even happening. She wasn't in my class anymore. Finally, they let me know about it. Once it became clear I had no idea what was going on and that we were not in direct contact. The final meeting on the subject was with the principal, vice principal, guidance counselor, both parents, the student, and me. They asked her the million-dollar question, "Why are you signing your last name as OPs?" The student went into a very long, emotional account of her parents' divorce, how she lost respect for both of them, and how she no longer wanted their name attached to hers. She chose mine, as I was, quote, the only respectable man in her life. All this while I'm sitting next to the parents, about 90 minutes after I even learned about this situation. It was a crazy day. Well, OP, sweet that you were a positive role model in a hard time in this person's life. However, yeah, that's going to be a little strange and a very awkward situation sitting next to the parents. Yeesh. Next story. My mom is a speech and language teacher in a very affluent area. Every teacher has to work with the difficult parents, but my mom has the added luxury of these difficult parents being filthy stinking rich. A parent at her school had a kid who wanted to be in the annual talent show, but failed to sign up, so his dad is actually suing the school because he believes that because his child is in the special ed program, he was entitled to a place in the talent show regardless if he signed up on time or not. Please note, this kid has a speech impediment. That's it. He is fully functional mentally and 100% capable of signing up on time. Next story. I was assisting as an early literacy teacher for ELL students from Mexico. There was this one little girl who would throw a tantrum if she didn't get her way and would look at me right in the eyes as she would pour her drink on herself during breakfast. She was just seeking attention, but her behavior was so disruptive she wouldn't learn anything. She did other things that were not appropriate for a child of that age. We called her mother in to talk about the child's behavior. The mom walked in the next morning, 15 minutes after class started, and went on a rant about how we were starving her child because we took away her milk the previous morning. We told her what was actually happening and explained that the child's attention-seeking behavior is disrupting her learning. I asked the mother to come back after school because she was now disrupting my lesson with the other students, and she refused to leave. I quickly gave the class group assignments and went back to speak to the mother to just get it over with. I elaborated on the child's behavior during class and that she was obviously not getting enough attention at home. The mother started making excuses about how she doesn't have time for her daughter because she's working and has a boyfriend now. This ticked me off. She then called her daughter over and started threatening her by saying if she misbehaves again, she's going to send her back to Mexico all alone and no one will love her anymore, that she'll be abandoned in the streets like a dog. She then told the girl that she was going to take her to the bathroom and spank her until her butt is blue because the teacher says she is stupid and bad. She then started leading the girl out of the class to the bathrooms and I grabbed the child back and told the mother she has to leave now. She said I better not call CPS and then left. I called administration, explained what happened, and they said they would handle CPS and everything else. I then took the girl aside and explained she isn't stupid or bad. I hugged her, gave her a sticker, and let her draw for half an hour. Now, I'm no expert on the matter, but I have a weird feeling that when you say, "You better not call CPS," someone's probably going to call CPS. It's just a weird thing to say. Even if you hadn't shown you've done anything wrong, it's just like, did you do something wrong? It makes you think. But then, OP also saw it, so made it easy for them. I hope that kid found a more loving home environment. Next story. I'm a male who teaches at the elementary level. I had a Ukrainian girl my first year of 5th grade. During parent-teacher conferences, the father said, "Enough of this academic business. In your opinion as a man, do you feel that my daughter will make a good wife someday?" It was one of my first conferences ever, and still the weirdest so far. Next story. Parent-teacher conferences. Girl had dropped my class a few weeks before because I'm a terrible teacher. Her dad sat down at my table and introduced himself, at which point I politely attempted to inform him I was no longer his daughter's geometry teacher. Him. I know. I wanted to speak to you about your classroom management skills. My daughter said that your class is chaotic, and you can't control the room. Me. She's telling the truth. I remember having to speak to your daughter on multiple occasions about paying attention, taking notes, doing work, and not texting during class. I know about the phone. She was texting me to tell me about how bad the class was. So, you were encouraging her to break school rules and disrespect the teacher while distracting her from learning? And then he said nothing. Next story. Student teacher here. I was left alone in the classroom my first year of university. This was a huge no-no, but the classroom teacher trusted me and figured what could happen in the 5 minutes she went to the washroom. A child's father came in, assumed I was the substitute, and starts blatantly hitting on me in front of the class of first grade students. I blushed hardcore and explained I was just the student teacher. I left out the part where I was only 18 at the time during my explanation. He looked embarrassed, went to help his kid get ready to leave, which he should have been doing anyway, and then the regular teacher came back. Apparently, I still looked shell-shocked because the regular teacher pulled me aside and asked what happened. Best part, the classroom teacher told me he was still married to the boy's mother. Next story. I had a kid feel sick who went to the nurse. They tried calling home, work cell numbers, but either no one answered or the mailbox was full. So when school was dismissed, he was sent home. Mom was mad and stormed in the next day with a Ziploc bag full of vomit to prove he had been sick. This was not the only time we had to threaten to call the police to remove her. Next story. Big dude, ponytail, biker jacket, Harley rider. Scruffy, looked the type to be in a motorcycle gang. Came into my classroom in my first year of teaching. Generally, these kinds of guys don't show up to parent-teacher nights, right? So when they do, you just gotta take a deep breath. It didn't really start well.
Are you the guy that's teaching my daughter?
He said in that low, kind of throaty growl. Sounded like the bike he rode, I guess. But what could I do but answer as professionally as possible? Yes, your daughter is a student in my Canadian history class. I have her marks here if you...
Yeah, not right now. She's been incredibly afraid of tests, exams, and school. But for some reason, she never misses your class. Always tells me about it. I don't know how you're doing it, but she really likes your class.
It was my first year of teaching. This student and a few other kids had serious test phobia. In particular, she would freeze up, start crying, serious anxiety issues about a test. So I wanted to help her out and I let her write tests at lunch where she could eat. There was nobody but me around and I would watch over her saying things like, "You studied this, remember? We made notes on it for your study guide." Insurance policy on my part. Students get an extra 5% if they create and hand in study notes before the test. In about 90% of the cases, the 5% bonus is unnecessary. They tend to do better by dint of making the notes anyway, along with getting her to make her own test. I'm not kidding, I let her write her own questions to the test, long answer questions mostly. I also had a fondness for tea when I was teaching, so if she was overwhelmed, she was allowed to make tea and think about her answers. By the end of the semester, she was a different girl. No more test phobias from her or a group of other students. Still, that big dude coming into my classroom and how quickly the situation turned 180 is pretty memorable for me. Edit. I miss teaching pretty badly. I'm glad so many of you wish for a teacher like me and are happy with what I did. That makes me feel great. But I feel like I should be a little more humble here and point out that I made a bunch of mistakes as a teacher as well, and there are most assuredly a good number of students who thought I was terrible. The really good teachers are the ones who took me, the completely new teacher, under their wing and said, "This is how you manage a class. These are some tips to help your students pass. Here's how you talk to parents." Teachers like Tim, Doug, Betty, and Julie, who are still teaching today, who have had thousands of students pass through their classrooms and still stay past the bell to listen to students, talk to guidance to see how kids are doing, and juggle marking, lesson planning, field trips, professional growth, and mentoring the panicky new birds who are just jumping into their own classrooms with gentle words like, "Yes, that lesson was terrible, but they'll forget all about it tomorrow. You should too. Keep moving on." I loved teaching, but the teachers who inspired me deserve the credit. Next story. My first grade teacher would have probably told you about my mother's first parent-teacher conference about me. The way my mother told it, the teacher told her I was having a really hard time learning how to read. My mother couldn't help but burst out in hysterical laughter. When she got herself under control, she told my teacher I had been reading books since I was 4, that I went to the town library and checked out adult books to read, that I definitely did not have a problem learning to read. Mom came home and asked me why I hadn't told the teacher I could read. I told her she hadn't asked me. Then I I told her that I thought I could not go to school and do all right. With my twin sisters at home, that was not even an option. Next day, 3 strange adults took me out of class. I had no idea what was going on. They gave me a newspaper and had me read an article and tell them what it said. Then they gave me a magazine, which was a little harder to understand. Then they gave me a book. When I went back to class, I was excused from reading class. I would take books to school and read them. I was the shy hillbilly kid that constantly had classmates correcting my pronunciation. I spoke fluent redneck, but radio English was my first foreign language. When I suddenly became teacher's pet, they became a lot nastier. They didn't so much bully me as constantly correct my pronunciation. When we moved at the end of the year, they had taught me radio English. Next story. I have a teacher friend who was ranted/screamed at by one of her students' fathers during an open house with all of her students and their parents around. The dad totally lost it and yelled in her face, called her a communist, and ended up storming off. My friend was a kindergarten teacher. He was berating her after she explained that at her school they teach their students to share art supplies. Next story. I had to tell a mom that we couldn't let her son in the school because he wasn't cleared medically. The kid had a heart condition and was often aggressive enough to be put in physical restraints, so we needed a doctor's note to say he was healthy enough to be put in one. Well, he shows up without one, so I call mom and say we can't let him in. She goes nuts. She says, and I quote, "Do I need to come down there and go black woman on your butt?" I responded by saying that now she was threatening me and that if he didn't get picked up, we would have to call the police and say she was neglecting him. I then hung up. Next story. Taught 3rd grade a long time ago when teachers were allowed to run their classrooms, and mornings before school were a time when the kids and teachers talked a lot. We also played all kinds of games and got pretty wild sometimes. Did I say there were 48 students in a class? Anyway, a parent comes into a parent-teacher conference and tells me what her child told her happens in my class. The story was quite exaggerated, so I looked her squarely in the eyes and said slowly, "You believe half of what your child says happens in my class, and I'll believe half of what your child says happens at home." Never had another parent complain. Next story. Not a teacher, but my mother has been one for 20 years. So at their house growing up, I have heard a lot of stories. At an after-school conference, a student's parents wanted my mother to stop giving homework in the middle of the week. Not because it was difficult or due to the kid playing sports, that's another story, but because on Wednesday nights, that was when their family went to the local Walmart and spent 3 to 4 hours in the store. Not shopping or getting groceries, they just walked around. A normal family outing for them. Next story. This female dog straight up accused my parents of oversized gold-plated paperclip thievery. Not a teacher, but my parents had a surreal encounter with one of my teachers. This woman called everyone Oscar, including the plant, called us tubs of lard or as stupid as tubs of lard, and she would make one poor student her female dog each month, demanding they fetch things for her like the whiteout that's already on the desk she's currently sitting at. Anyway, I told my parents about halfway through the school year and they schedule a conference. She denies everything, but she's so flustered that it's obvious she's lying, and my parents make it clear that if this continues, they'll go to administration. My dad says at that point she basically starts having a manic episode, moving quickly around the room, talking a lot and straightening things. So my parents leave. Later that morning, once classes are about to start, a girl from her, the teacher's, homeroom class comes in to talk to me.
She wants to know if your parents stole her paperclip.
I said no, and thought that was that. Except it wasn't. I had 2 classes taught by her that day, and she harassed me before and after the first class and during the second class about where her paperclip was, asking why I wouldn't just give it back. I even went home and asked my parents if they could somehow have accidentally taken it, and we searched everywhere. She kept on me about it for the rest of the year. My sister had her 2 years later, same problems. That was her last year at our school, though. She got pulled and sent to teach ESL to adults in the city. Next story. Throwaway because I do not need lawsuits. So I taught in a fancy expensive boarding school for like a decade. Here's some stories. A kid got kicked out for selling pot to his classmates. His parents came to pick him up. Dad was stoned. I guess we all know where he got his merchandise from. Once a mom called at like 2 a.m. yelling through the phone that her son was going to take his own life. Please make sure he's alive. I just went, what the hell? Checked on the kid and he was fine. Mom said, "Oh, but he didn't take his meds this morning. And if he doesn't take his meds, he'll do it." Turns out that he had severe anxiety and depression and was prescribed some heavy-duty, abuse-prone antidepressants. The parents told neither of those things to us before sending him across the country to a boarding school. Worse, state law and common sense required us to lock up the meds and administer them because we're legally responsible for both him and the medication. We don't want him to skip taking the meds or for other kids to steal and abuse or sell the meds. Even worse, his mom has been sending him the meds in unmarked, over-the-counter pill bottles through postal mail. So anyway, while he lived in my dorm, his mom would regularly call me in a panic whenever she thought he didn't take his meds. That was a fun year. One more that isn't mine. One day, a dad gave my female coworker a giant pile of sausages, like Italian sausage, Polish sausage, just meat sticks of all kind. Turns out he owned a sausage factory and he shows gratitude by giving people freezers full of sausages. She called me over and we had a giant sausage party. OP, man, you gotta phrase things better at the end. That being said, I don't mind that method of repayment for favors and such. I would definitely not say no to a bunch of sausages. Maybe I need to work on how I phrase things. Next story. I caught 2 students viewing adult content on the cell phone of one of the students. I wrote them up and one of the mothers came into a parent-student-teacher meeting. In said meeting, she demanded to view the video in question. I told her I didn't know what it was and that it was a bad idea in general. She went through the kid's history on his phone browser, what kind of amateur doesn't clear the history, until the 3 of us had the pleasure of viewing adult content together as a team. It was beyond awkward. Next story. I once taught a kid that looking back on it probably had some mental issues. I say looking back because the mother had opted her son out of special ed after various referrals and suggestions that mentioned his type of behavior and learning style. This kid was fairly smart, but he had absolutely no social skills. He would often stop an assignment halfway through because he deemed it was reading time. Anyway, I digress. One of his biggest problems was so simple it frustrated me to the end of the earth. He couldn't be bothered to bring a pencil to class, ever. Whenever he needed a pencil, he would basically shout out, "I need a pencil!" These interruptions happened in the middle of a lesson, a math problem, etc. It bugged most of the students who wanted to learn, but it also frustrated me, having to stop the entire class to help the damn kid get his writing utensil. I, along with other classmates, gave him numerous pencils, pens, even damn crayons for God's sake. Not a day went by where he didn't ask for a pencil. After a good 2 months of pencil specialist type work, I gave up and told him he needed to get his pencil himself. At this point, I'd given him multiple boxes and a few pens. I was done donating my dwindling class budget on pencils. I simply told him that if you don't find a pencil, I guess you won't be able to complete your work. I knew damn well that he wouldn't finish the assignment, but assumed he would later when his mom saw the 0% that he would naturally receive. Later, the next week, his mom burst into the door while I'm teaching another class. Semi-shocked, I greet her and gave out the assignment to my class, telling her I would be with her in a moment. As I went to the hallway to talk, not a new thing with this lady, I noticed her face was slightly more contorted than usual. She was always unhappy, but I could tell this time she meant business. I barely got a word in before she yelled,
Why do you let my son fail his assignment for no reason? He's a great child, smarter than those idiots in the classroom.
I remember saying something along the lines of, I didn't have any spare pencils to loan him. He's used over 30 pencils in my class. She decided that she was done talking to a simple peasant and left to talk to the principal. I returned to my classroom and went on teaching. I later get a note from the principal asking me to make a special accommodation for the kid in question. It informed me it was now my sole duty to get the kid a pencil. I was mad, but also shocked by my coworker's behavior. I guess he was just sick of the mother's crap too. Not wanting to spend my entire class budget on one child, I came up with the amazing idea of tying a pencil to the kid's desk. I contemplated how I was going to do this due to the fact that the pencil is inherently slick and easily breakable. After long thought over the break, the next Monday I made my move. Using a potent amount of superglue and reinforced string, I tied the pencil to one of the support bars on the desk. Sure, it was limiting, but it was better than giving him a pencil every day until the end of the year. I never once had another incident with pencils, which is something I cherish every day. Next story. I was teaching a study abroad course in France, and 2 American women trashed a hotel room. These women rubbed feces all over the walls, left used tampons on their beds, left broken glass from wine bottles all over the floor. Obviously, I started the process to have them removed from the program when we returned from the excursion. After meeting with the girls and telling them I would be kicking them out, I received about 8 or 9 phone calls from their parents telling me I would be sued when I returned to the US if I kicked them out. There I was in France, having the parents of 2 20-something-year-old women tell me that nothing is wrong with their grown daughters crapping all over hotel walls. They literally thought I shouldn't have been angry. Finally, my boss's boss stepped in and threatened to fire my boss if he proceeded with any discipline. I still had them kicked out of the residence that they lived in. Turns out the father of one of the women was a major donor to the university I worked for. Turns out that even though money may not be able to buy you happiness, it will allow you to get away with painting other people's walls in crap. Next story. A young man in my middle school English class would often arrive tardy for the first period. He usually was dressed shabbily and sometimes smelled a little off. I was looking forward to meeting his parents to gain some insight into his home life. Be careful what you ask for. The mother arrived wearing very dirty and shabby overalls with a dried animal crap on the right pant leg. She stunk. Oh, did she stink. I doubt she had ever endured a grooming experience. She was pleasant enough, and when I inquired about the son's tardiness, she explained, "We live on a farm." The way she pronounced the word farm totally cracked me up. The only thing keeping me from giggling was the stench of dung on her clothing. I told the story to my kids, and from then on, whenever we had the opportunity to say the word farm, it is always pronounced farm. Next story. I'm not a school teacher, but used to teach several kids programs at a church. There was one little girl who kept bringing lice in, and her parents never did anything about it. I decided to spend some more time with the family to see if I could help them out. I eventually discovered that both parents had developmental handicaps and were basically incapable of caring for a child. I would come visit and she would have eaten only ketchup for dinner, not by choice, but because it was the only thing in the house. I would take her out to eat so she could get a real meal. Soon I was in way over my head. I was 19 at the time and got some help from other members of the church. Eventually the police were involved because the mom was abusing both the dad and the daughter. The girl was eventually removed from the home and went to live with her aunt and cousin and was doing better and getting real nutrition. Next story. A parent, not a teacher, but it's a parent-teacher meeting. My daughter brought home a note asking me to meet with the teacher after school the next day. She volunteers that she was caught reading A Brief History of Time in science class when she was supposed to be reading her 4th grade science book in time with the rest of the class. She said she had already read the assignment and was bored. Okay, didn't follow instructions, but not a big deal. Go to the meeting. It's the teacher, the principal, me, and my daughter. I'm a little surprised. This seems an overreaction, unless I haven't been told the whole truth. Teacher begins. She's concerned that she caught a daughter reading a horror novel in class. One of those really dark ones meant for adults, not age-appropriate. A Brief History of Time is laid on the table. I express confusion. That book? Yeah, that book. Principal, evidently she just saw the book, looks confused as well. Flash of insight. Wait, this is Stephen Hawking. I think you're thinking Stephen King. King writes horror. Hawking writes the science stuff. Principal picks up a book and flips through it. Asks my daughter, "Do you understand this?" Daughter says, "Yes, but I had to read the part about the differences between general relativity and special relativity 3 times. Teacher picks up the book and looks at the content a minute, then puts it down and points to the cover with Hawking in his chair. Well, you have to admit, that's a pretty frightening cover. Not really what a 4th grader should be reading. Daughter has long since graduated college, so it didn't affect her permanent record too much, I guess. Okay, hold on, sorry. The principal doubled down? Like that wasn't a joke? That was straight up, you shouldn't read this because the guy on the front or back or wherever is in a wheelchair. This is not real, right? There's no way? Please tell me it's not real. Or at least that I'm misunderstanding it. Next story. I work for the schools in the business office. We get a lot of complaints about teachers from parents. I have this parent who regularly calls me to complain. At the end of each session, he asks, "How about them apples?" I don't know how to respond to that. How should I respond to a person who keeps asking me, "How about them apples?" I don't know anything about any apples. I just tell him, "Okay." So what is a good response for the next time he calls me? Next story. Not a teacher, but I've got a story from my time in band. My parents are divorced and have been for decades. Dad isn't the kind of guy who pays child support on time. He paid. He would just go 3 or 4 months between checks. And he's about as antisocial as you can get and still almost function in society. Anyway, I'm 14, playing percussion in a small town setting. It was early in the year, football season's underway, and I've got a pretty substantial/flashy xylophone solo. Dad has never seen me play before or taken an interest in anything I did or have done musically. After halftime, he comes up to the stand and proceeds to sign me out to go home. His weekend for visitation. And he goes on and on about what a lazy, stupid, irrational child I was, and how well my director had worked with me despite my disability. Director,
What disability?
You know, she's a woman, and she's irrational 2 weeks out of the month.
My director refused to let Dad assign me out without my mother there, and I found myself in the counselor's office the next Monday. Dad spent the rest of his weekend bickering about jerk teachers that don't understand crap about parenting. Wow, no offense, OP, but I wish your dad got no visitation. That sounds abysmal. Next story. I was a mid-20s white male who had just finished my bachelor's degree. My primary focus was on elementary education and special education. Through my work and connections, I started a job in the state capital's inner-city school district. I knew my race would make things more of a challenge with some of the Black and Hispanic students, but I never realized how much of that attitude came from the parents. It was my first parent-teacher conference night. Everything was going pretty smoothly, and I was happy with the interaction and meeting with the parents. Parent after parent comes in until the mother of one of my most challenging students came in. Of course, I say how much of a pleasure it is to finally meet her. I start off with the positives, plan to segue to areas of improvement and more positives. Eventually, I say something along the lines of, "No matter what approach I take, I can't convince your son to listen to me." This was her response.
That's because I told him not to listen to you. You're white.
I start nodding my head like an idiot. I begin avoiding eye contact and I start to stutter my words. I had no idea how to respond to that. I hastily collected the notes I had for her, handed them to her, and told her if she had any questions to feel free to contact me. Good times. Next story. I'm a high school English teacher in a district that has a high population of families from Mexico. Parents have, on more than one occasion, pulled me aside at parent-teacher conferences and gave me their express permission to use corporal punishment on their sons and daughters. Many times I'll laugh it off, and many times they'll grab me by the arm and tell me, "I'm serious. You can hit him or her. I won't say anything." Next story. My friend is a private teacher in Tokyo. She works with a student whose father is a lead designer at a popular fashion brand. The child is great. Average, sweet child. But the mom is really living the life. She noticed one day that her outfit during midday was different than the morning, and then when the child went home at night, different outfit again. All expensive high-end clothing, fur, leather, and gold. They eventually become closer, seeing each other 3 times a day, and asks her about it. She just says she has a lot of free time. Changes if she has yoga class as well. It must be nice to be rich. Next story. Parent threatened to cut my hands off if I didn't let her son listen to music on his phone while I taught. I said no. She looked at me like I sucker punched her baby boy right in front of her and threatened to sue me. This was about a month ago. Last week she sent her college accounting homework to school with her son so that we could do it for her. I teach middle school. Next story. I work for a small English academy in Japan. We have a young kids class that the kids do with the parents in the room. We have a student whose parents let her do whatever she wants. Anyway, during class, she just laid down on the floor. Her parents watched and did nothing, even though all the other kids were participating in the lesson. The teacher stood her up and said she needs to try in the lesson. Her parents flipped crap and said the teacher was out of line. It turned into a 2-hour post-lesson discussion where the parents told the teacher he knows nothing about education, blah, blah, blah. Their daughter is 3. The teacher has been working in Japanese education for 10 years. Next story. Long story short, had a parent go to the school board because her son got a B+ in my video production class. He was barely getting an A- because he did mediocre work and never put in any extra time, but he was a pretty bright kid. So he did pretty decently considering how little he tried. When the final came, that caught up with him a bit. So he got a very low B- on the final, which brought his grade to a B+. She claimed everything under the sun, that I was singling her kid out. He never got Bs, only As were acceptable in their house. Her whipped husband came in with her like a dog on a leash. Poor bastard obviously didn't wear the pants at all there. It was really freaking tense. So I said we should meet with the principal, just so I would at least be there to give my side so she didn't call in and talk a bunch of crap about me. Meeting with the principal went okay, but she tried to throw me under the bus quite a few times, saying I claimed her son was a B student when what I said was he got a B+ because he got a B- on the final, which brought his grade down, questioning my final and how it was graded when it was spelled out in the syllabus she signed and I still had, and then compared me to the previous teacher, claiming his curriculum was better without any details to back it up. The previous guy was a moron who let the kids screw around on YouTube all hour and gave everyone A's. So, unsurprisingly, he was really popular. She didn't get crap there, so she went to the school board. My principal went to speak his piece and recommended I didn't go so he could handle it. Issue ended there without any heat actually coming down on me, so it was all good. I came to find out later she had pulled the same crap with several teachers, and I was the first one who didn't back down and bump the kid up to an A. freaking idiot. What's the thought process here? Do you think your kid is actually benefiting from this? I promise you that just throwing an A on your kid's paper is not helping them at all. That is a great way to inhibit their learning for sure. So if that's what you want, go crazy. Next story. Too many parents try to fight either the teacher or a student their own child dislikes. I've had a parent want to fight me. I looked at her like she was crazy and she left. I've had fellow teachers sneak out the back way to avoid parents fighting them. One of my friends had to drive a student home because the parents of another student wanted to fight him. Yeah, grown people want to fight a 12-year-old boy. Next story. Pretty tame in comparison to some of the tales in this thread, but when I was doing my first parent-teacher evening for a class, one set of parents sticks in mind. I was explaining how their son was bright, but needed to focus on working rather than chatting with his mate, and the mom and dad had a proper go at him, telling the boy if he didn't do well enough in class, they would, and I quote, send him back to Africa. It's entirely possible he'd never been to Africa in his life, by the way. What made this particularly stand out was that the two parents didn't agree where they would send him in Africa. The mom wanted to send him to Nigeria while the dad was set on the Congo. Not sure which one. Next story. During my first year on the job, one parent came to my conferences and was upset I'd given her son a 0 on a quiz because he'd been whispering to the girl seated next to him, after already being warned once to be quiet. She was also another teacher in the district, which is why when she said,
If you don't give him a second chance to change that 0, well, I know where you live.
I didn't give him a second chance and got the union involved. I filed a grievance. I was super salty. Next story. I'm not a real teacher, but I am a childcare teacher, and when you work in childcare, you interact with the parents daily. I have so many odd encounters, but I can only recall a couple at the moment. There was one night a dad comes in to pick up his kids. He has 3 in total, aging around 5, 3, and 4 months old. He comes into the newborn classroom and goes to one of the babies, not his, starts talking to it in cutesy baby talk, and proceeds to lift this child up to be put in the car seat to take home. It was really awkward for both the father and I when I had to tell him, you're taking the wrong kid home. One mom threw a full-out temper tantrum at me at the front desk during pickup time, the busiest time in a daycare, in front of tons of other parents and teachers, all because I put her 3-year-old son in a, quote, girl pull-up when he had no extra clothes or pull-ups of his own left to give him, and all we had were girly ones. I mean, she was full-on screaming and stomping her feet, telling me I humiliated him. Her husband came back an hour later without her to apologize to me for how she acted. People are really out there not understanding that the whole gendering of colors or aesthetics or whatever is completely learned behavior. That's crazy to me. I feel like it should be pretty obvious that, no, your child did not come out of the womb thinking that, oh, I'm a boy, blue's my favorite color, I hope I don't get put in the pink pull-ups, I would be mortified. You know, I just don't think they're thinking that for some reason. Anyway, that's the last story for today. So for now, I'd just like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.